I hope that you enjoyed the poems I read last week. I just read a few for fun. And this week we're going to read some poems and talk about them more in depth. To begin with, I want to give you a little background on poetry. Poetry is one of the oldest forms of literature. Throughout history, people have used poetry to pass along news, create songs and stories, and record events. Poetry allows you to share your thoughts and feelings in a special way. Poetry says a lot in just a few words, and it speaks to the heart as well as to the mind. The poem, as an art form, appeals to the eye and to the ear. Poetry looks different. Without reading words, you can look at a poem and know it is a poem by its appearance on the page. Most poetry is pleasing to the ear. You can hear a poem read aloud and know it's a poem because it sounds like one. Some poems rhyme, but not all. A poem needs to be read aloud in order to be fully appreciated and enjoyed. If you just read it silently in your head, then you miss the music and probably some of the meaning as well. Poems are usually organized into sections called stanzas, which you're familiar with. When we memorized Maker of Heaven and Earth, we memorized one stanza each week. But sometimes the stanzas take on all different forms, as you've seen in some of the other poems I've already read. Two devices often used in poetry are repetition and rhyme. Now I'm going to read one called The Swing by Robert Louis Stevenson, and I want you to think about, while I'm reading, what are some words that are repeated, and does this poem rhyme? How do you like to go up in a swing, up in the air so blue? Oh, I do think it the pleasantest thing ever a child can do. Up in the air and over the wall, till I can see so wide, rivers and trees and cattle and all over the countryside, till I look down on the garden green, down on the roof so brown. Up in the air I go flying again, up in the air and down. So what words were repeated in that poem? Well, up was repeated quite a bit, and down. And didn't the poem sound like a swing? The words kind of lift up, and then they go down, and then they go up, and then they go down. The whole poem just sounds like you're swinging back and forth as you read it. There's up, up in the air, till I look down, down, up, and down. And what about rhyme? Did it have rhyme? Yes, it had swing, thing, blue dew, wall all, wide side, green again, it's kind of a stretch to make that a rhyme, brown down. So this one had both repetition and rhyme, and clearly divided into 3 even stanzas. Again, not all poems have those things, but many do. Let's look at another one. This is called Little Snail. Think if it rhymes and if it has any repetition. It's written by Hilda Conkling. This is out of your grammar book. If you wanted to read it yourself. Of course, I hit my camera. And it disappeared. Hopefully it'll come back. Little Snail by Hilda Conkling. I saw a little snail come down the garden walk. He wagged his head this way, that way, like a clown in a circus. He looked from side to side, as though he were from a different country. I have always said he carries his house on his back. Today in the rain, I saw that it was his umbrella. So, this poem is not divided into separate stanzas. It's all just one stanza. Does it rhyme? I don't think so. I don't really see any examples of rhyme. Does it repeat? Does it have repetition? It does a little bit. This way, that way, side, side. What do you think about this line? As though he were from a different, he looked from side to side as though he were from a different country. Do you know what they're talking about there? Like somebody who's in a new place they've never been before and they're just looking and looking. It reminds me of when we read Sammy the Seal and he was out and just looking at all the buildings and the people. So, and let's see, there's some questions about this poem. Actually, I want you to discuss this with your parents. In your textbook, page 377, there are a list of 7 discussion questions here to go with the little snail poem. So talk about that with your parents. And then you can read the color poems. And you're going to write your own color poem. Okay, it says pick a color as your title. Tell about your color in complete sentences. Your sentences do not have to rhyme. So here are some examples. Orange is. Orange is the glow of a fire. Orange is a field of round pumpkins. Orange is the pretty fall leaves. Orange can be a crayon, a lollipop, or juice. Orange is the carrot nose on a snowman. Orange is the sun coming up and going down. Goodbye, orange. Here's another color poem, Brown and the Senses. This one they talked about each of the 5 senses. Brown looks like tree trunks and funny bears. Brown smells like pancakes and syrup. Brown tastes as good as a brownie. Brown sounds like crunchy leaves under my feet. Brown feels like a warm wool coat in winter. So those poems don't rhyme, do they? But they're definitely poems and they make you feel a certain way. Okay, so your assignment is to read these questions and discuss Little Snail, and then using this example, write your own color poem. And then I want you to save your poems. We're going to write a few this next week or two, and then we'll have a Zoom meeting and we'll read our favorite poem that we wrote on the meeting. So make sure you write your poem in a special place and hang on to it. You could use your copybook or your interactive grammar notebook where we're putting our thankfulness journal. So put it in one of those 2 books. Have fun.